Electrocast.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Our heart rates at complete unity tend to be right around like 60 to 100 BPM. But the power of 120 BPM is where your body starts to get active, but it's not too overwhelming. So you're able to take in more information from that general BPM area.
You come to realize is that a lot of sounds actually aren't diegetic. They're not the real sounds. Because what you're doing is you're building things for people's expectation of what that is. Hey, John, welcome to Brain Arcade. So, you know what? I never asked you, how do you pronounce your last name? But so introduce yourself, pronounce your last name correctly, and then I'll know.
So even the embarrassing thing, I can't pronounce it 100% correct. So a shame to my Hispanic side of the family, but it's just Ontiveros. I can't roll my R's. Okay. Yeah.
Got it. And then give me the full profile, like your studio and what you're trying to do and like day job stuff, like so people know who I'm talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Jonathan Ontiveros. I am a sound designer and the creative director here at Nobody Games. My background came in from, growing up as a musician and having a passion for games and music. Went to school for music and I quickly got introduced into sound design. And a lot of my experience was out in the film industry. I was very fortunate to be part of a team to help develop an audio software. And that's where my experience for programming started coming in and wanted to take that translation into the game audio industry. So that's a bit of like my background for sound design, but that's also where the birth of Nobody Games came in from too as well. So I just wanted to start practicing implementation for audio into video games and the rest of your history.
So more sound than music? Because I see a lot of guitars in your background. Like, are you doing music too, or is it just sound?
Yeah, so that's a lot of where my passion came in from. So I grew up playing music. I've been in and out of bands here, in the SoCal punk rock scene. So I was always in and out of a lot of studios. In fact, these two right here, I actually built myself, and the rest of them I purchased there. But that's where my passion for just audio engineering came in from, where I was able to go into a studio, record music, and hear the engineer turn something that sounded very dry into a nice processed sound. It sparked my curiosity of just like how you could do that and just how everything looked in the studio. So that's really where the birth of just my sound engineering came in from. And then quickly into college, I got introduced into sound design, and that opened up a whole new world of not just linear audio, but also sound for interactive media. So we were learning softwares, like Wise, Fmod, Max, just anything for interactive audio. And that's where just my mind just kind of, saw like this unlimited what you could do if you go down that route.
That's interesting. So like the reason I ask is because, this industry is so big. There's lots of specializations, right? And so sound design can mean a lot of things, but it can also be like specifically Foley or just sound effects or just like, or mixing or like, you know what I mean? Like I know most sound designers do a little bit of everything, but they don't always do music too. And so it's interesting to me that you also have like, you've got music in your background, so you can kind of do a full package sound. You're like a one-man sound department. So like, that's super cool. I can tell you about some of the early days, but like, so your studio, what are you building there, and how are you making that transition from focused on sound to like running a studio?
So to add everything in between, so once I tried to take all my expertise I learned from the film industry and learning audio software to get into the game audio industry, this was also at a time where, there was the rise of generative AI and then, post-COVID, there was just a massive amount of layoffs happening, not only from the film industry, but also happening into the game industry.
Yep.
And of course, I unfortunately was at that time trying to transition out of film into the game audio, and all that just followed along. So, and it was just a case of just mass layoffs, and it just kind of felt like being like a needle in a haystack trying to get any opportunities for interviews and etc. So because of that, it was just a case of like, well, I have true confidence in what I could provide, and I'm always willing to learn as much as I can. So if I can't find the opportunities, I'm going to just do the best I can to make the opportunities myself.
Yeah.
And this also happened at a time where the rise of indie volunteer studios like K-Bear Games, I reached out to Ayla. When I saw this whole momentum building, it just kind of felt more a better time than ever to really pursue what I was already having in the back of my mind. So that's really where the birth of Nobody came in from. And it was all just in the case of I was trying to practice implementing sound to a video game. So I needed to make some, a basic game at that time. And then I was able to show it to some of the peers from the Discord community. And then it just kind of birthed into our small team to what we have now. That's
fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah. It's really wild to me being a pre-internet person. I like finding this kind of support had to happen in a physical world. Like basically the first people that I did, game collaboration stuff with were like people in the dorms or like other coworkers or whatever. And so like the whole world of like helping each other out, or even like just knowing how many like indie games are out there is really fun for me and mind-boggling, because like the ability or ease to be able to collaborate with people is so much higher. And it's different, but it's like, it's so cool because I can see that the generations behind me are now having opportunities that I never had. Right. Like, but basically, if you were in the games industry in the early days, you were privileged. You may not have been rich, but what I mean is like you had access to technology. Right. And technology access was like a big barrier of entry for getting in the games. Right. And then the other way was like networking. And so it's really cool now. It's like that's no longer a barrier. People are getting into it. There's no reason why you have to like lock into a specialty, right? Everybody can make their game. It's like kind of the YouTubing of like game making is happening, right? Where like basically people can have their own sort of outlet. I think, we're very fortunate that, with video games or just technology in general has become so mainstream and very easy access. So even translation to like my background in audio engineering, there was still a time where like if you wanted to record something phenomenal, you had to go to a studio that had, millions of dollars of equipment. You got to pay, several $100s an hour for just a decent session versus with general investment, you can build what that studio had at that $1 million studio within your own office. So a lot of things like that just kind of translated with a lot of technology and even with video game production and, being the rise of the internet as well. Just we're very fortunate. And I mean, I was born in 92, so I kind of got the early era before internet was really a big thing in our home to what it's evolved now to be able to see that progression. Yeah, it's in your pocket. Literally what it is now. So kind of what you're saying, like we're in this era where like collaboration and communication for things like with Discord or just social media in general has a very easy access to form a group or a community of people who are willing to help out. And because everything is very Dropbox or internet based, it's very easy nowadays to be able to work in collaboration from someone who's either in your hometown versus someone who's across the globe. Yeah, totally. And that's also another brain shift for me is like, intellectually and conceptually, I understand that I can be interacting with people in Poland, right? Yeah. But the reality is like, you don't like my brain still thinks in like Western market, Europe market, Asia market, you know what I mean? And like that actually those boundaries don't really need to be inhibitors anymore. Like it used to be because you would get on like AOL and you could send an email all over the world, but AOL was an American company, right? Yeah. And so like it was very regional even in the early days of the internet, but now that's even, those barriers are broken. So like you can essentially be collaborating with people from all over the world and you don't have, false borders or whatever, as long as you don't have a language issue, you can collaborate with whoever, wherever, but that also means I could be very mobile. Right. Yeah. I could be living that hashtag van life and like, working from the road. But, and I'm sure you probably have this experience too of like, I'm sure back then, it was a very tight niche of where this industry was at, just like how, the Hollywood industry or film was always like, Los Angeles, Hollywood was like the Mecca. But because we have access to everything that's very Dropbox based, internet based, we're also seeing more game studios expand, the Midwest or in areas that it wasn't so popular in that niche. But because again, hashtag van life, people are now able to do either work from home, hybrid, or just work from anywhere as long as they have a connection to work with the company. So back in the day, you had epicenters, right? You had these like these epicenter locations. So it was like Austin grew into a thing because of Origin and Dell computers, and like Silicon Valley had a computer, like you know what I mean? Like you had these like tech cities where people were drawn to go into those industries, and it was very much about physically based. But then like, you know, we started seeing like, oh wait, there's a studio in Minnesota, you know, not just Chicago, but like, you know, Champaign. Like who knew that there was the guys who did Saints Row, right? They were in Champaign, like because they were close to the university. But it's wild now. You could literally be anywhere and work on stuff, right? You don't have to be near Irvine or West LA, or like, you know, you can literally be working like, you know, with a satellite dish in the middle of the Gobi Desert. Like it doesn't matter. Like you can be wherever and work on stuff, and the power is there. It's really cool. So wait, let's get back to sound a little bit. Yeah. Which like, not to make you pick a specialty, but which part of sound design do you enjoy the most?
So during the 5 years that I was developing audio software. So by the way, I worked for a company called Audio Design Desk, and we built an audio software that used AI assisted technology to help sync your sound effects to video much faster than traditional audio or traditional drag and drop. So we had to build a sound effects library, and part of my role there was making the cinematic sound effects, like the non-diegetic type of sound effects you would hear in a lot of films. So because of that, I grew a strong expertise into more the cinematic sound design, your traditional risers, the beds, drones within that element. So that's kind of where the stronger forte where I've had my expertise in is kind of developing more into that. And I realized that it translated really well. And you kind of said, you know, like some people are either musicians or they're sound designers, but I've met a lot of people who got into sound design because they were making like EDM or dance music, because essentially you are doing sound design. You're manipulating these sawtooth waves or these sound waves to kind of create your own unique sound. And that exactly translates to what generic sound design in for like these like non-diegetic type of sounds. And by the way, diegetic sounds are sound effects that exist into an environment. So say you're watching a film and they're interacting with like moving cabinets or walking around. Those sound effects exist into the environment, versus non-diegetic is the sound design elements that help build the emotion behind the scenes. So example, like with the horror film where they hear something behind the door and they're like creeping up to it, and that riser's building up that tension, is more the sound design element. So that's where I would say my strongest forte was in there. So having that translate now into more of an interactive audio, now that's a whole different ballpark versus linear sound design versus interactive sound design. The technical implementation of sound design is where I'm trying to start pursuing more into, but I would say my strongest forte is your cinematic sound design elements.
Okay, that's interesting. So like, oh my God, I got so many sound stories, but I'll put one out there for you that you can ask me about another time, which is basically we sent our sound designers for a couple of the Medal of Honor games into the desert of Arizona with a side of beef and a bunch of guns and 7 microphones. And they basically did a whole day recording session, you know, shooting a huge side of beef. Like
that's amazing.
It was pretty amazing. But that's on the sound effects side. On the composing side, I worked at Christopher Leonard's for a little bit, but I also worked at Michael Giacchino for a while. This is early, like just post Alias days before. I don't know if I could even afford like a 15-minute consultation with Michael Giacchino or Christopher Leonard's anymore. But like that was a case where we had internal sound designers and we had like a composer, because he was doing more orchestral stuff, where he and I worked very closely together on like how we build stuff. And I think for your game, I would love to actually try to replicate some of that stuff with you. We just had to sort of get organized around like, I'll be your muse and extract. Like I'm going to need you to wear 2 hats, right? Like I need you to wear like the sound hat, but then also the design hat. And I'll help moderate between those two. And you can get in arguments with yourself, like in a very like split screen kind of way. But like, it's super important. And it's interesting that you mentioned EDM composers end up being good at sound, because like the way I look at games is it's loops, right? And which is like almost a direct vocabulary translation into like lots of electronic music, right? Yeah. And so the loops in games, there's absolutely a way to correlate to music and sound and ambience. Why did I say it so weird? And the ambience of like the levels you're in or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's a puzzle game or if it's an experiential game. Tell me a little bit about the game, and then how the sound is working in it.
Yeah, before segueing into that, I just want to just add on to like even like when you talk about loops and EDM, like I don't know if you're familiar with like the 120 BPM and how that's a very standard unity to human interaction, where typically like our heart rates at complete unity tend to be right around like 60 to 100 BPM. But the power of 120 BPM is that is where your body starts to get active, but it's not too overwhelming. So you're able to take in more information from that general BPM area. So it's like a psychological thing that you notice a lot of dance music tends to be in 120, 130 versus if you're listening to a lot of more hard style or something more aggressive, it tends to be, you know, like 150, 160. And that translates to that type of emotion that you're going to feel there. So that's why a lot of like dance artists are really good sound designers in the industry. And that's how I know quite a bit of people, if that's how they segue into realizing they could translate what they've done musically into sound design.
So I'll break out a couple of different things for you there, because this is actually something that I work into how I work sound into the levels. So first, like footnote, 120 is actually also a march.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's important because that's like, it's faster than your normal walk, right? But it's also not jogging. And so it's like it's this intermediary pace, which is like a little bit faster, but like it's active, and it's concerted effort. Like I'm going somewhere, right? Yeah. As opposed to like, once you start to go above that, you have your feet start to leave the ground for a little longer. You start to end up jogging, or you're running or sprinting or whatever. But the other thing, and I stole this from movie people, was the BPM of the bass line in your music and games is actually you're prescribing the heart rate of the player, because they have a tendency to sympathetically match it. And this happens in movies too, where like contrast works as well, where you do a slow beat to go with like a high heart rate area. But generally you subconsciously control the viewer or the user or player's like heart rate by adjusting the BPM of the background music, typically the bass line. So the other thing that's interesting about this though is the way we applied this in the old days, especially something that's semi-linear, was I would do beat charts for levels, and the beats that I was paying attention to. So in movies, there's a thing called beat charts, right? But they also do like color beat charts. So like what the color composition is, etc. Right. And so essentially I would do these beat charts that were essentially intensity charts. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the intensity of the experience right here? Right. And so we'd map that out in a big room. Well, first I would break it into sections, and then those sections would go down. And then eventually it would be like, what's the intensity of the loops here? Yeah. Right. Because we had an early version of dynamic music back in the day, but it was tied to like a location or area. And so I basically tied this like intensity score to all the areas. Right. Then we had other loops that like once you got into combat, it would kick in. Right. But generally the base layer was based on this intensity beat chart. So I would make a beat chart. Then I would go to the composer. At that time, it was Michael Giacchino, and go, okay, here are the beats for the level. Right. Then he would go and compose something. He would get an overhead map of the level, understand where the loops went, what they were going to do, where streaming transitions happened. And by streaming, I mean like level streaming. Right. Because we broke the levels up into like chunks, right? Like these like loading chunks. But to get that to work smoothly, we had to funnel the player sometimes into a place where we can unload and load lots of textures and geometry. And so he basically composed to those beats, but also to knowing when he could do major changes, right? Yeah. And so it was like, basically we would do this like low level manipulation of the player's heart rate by changing the background loop, right? Yeah. I think that's something we can apply to your game as well, because you're in the horror genre. So we can do a lot of these like subtle heartbeat things.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, because getting back into the question of like translating it into what we're currently building. So for those who don't know, we're currently building an indie horror game, and a lot of what you just said right there, digesting all that in, is a lot of what translates really well when it comes to horror games as well. You mentioned about like that low sub bass, kind of like that rhythmic element, and in sound design, you know, we call them pulses, or like a foundation of like a drone that has a pulse element. Yep. And from a psychological point of view, you translate that to kind of enter the person's heart rate from a very early psychological point. And then the rest of the layers really stack onto depending on what the intention you want to do with the player in that case. And that's where a lot of other rhythmic elements will start to add on. If you want to have it be a bit staggered, so it kind of has think of uncertainty, because now you're picking at the brain of like, you're not getting the same rhythmic, comfortable element. You're getting something that's throwing you off, and it's making your brain question, am I safe, or am I happy, or am I sad? And it plays onto that with a lot of indie horror game elements too, but they definitely feed off that low sub-bass element. A lot of times it translates to the heartbeat of a game, because it really translates to a good entryway to get into the player psychologically. So absolutely.
But yeah, and also like there are those places where you could hit that discomfort or comfort, and like creating those contrasts, right? Like that's why the beat chart was super important for us, was like making what you're talking about conscious decisions. So you're like, oh, I want to drive a discomfort here, or like this should be rest, right? Like this is where the player is going to be resting. The challenge for your game though is that because it's in a house, you're going to have to find something different to key off of. Like you need another element, because location can't be enough. It has to be like first time you go into the room versus like 10th time. And then, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have to think about like elements like that, or like, did something change, or is there something dynamic in the room, or, you know, is there another layer we can put onto this? Cause like, for me, it was easy because we built what I used to call a snake that swallowed a bunch of eggs. Like there was an eventual linear destination, so I could assume that at some point you're going to be tied to this locality as far as what the sounds were going to be, and generally what was going to be happening there. So the I didn't even think about it. It would have been really easy to switch it so that if you cleared an area and you came back to it, to actually have low intensity sound. To, you know what I mean? To like let you know that it's empty.
Yeah, right. Even just even from like a sound design psychological point of view, even if you throw in something different, like once the player gets familiar with something that they can recognize as like, okay, this is like a sense of comfort. But the second you throw the bone, even if it's something just to throw them off, and even if you're not intending to have something pop up afterwards, just throwing a bone into their logic will start throwing them off from a psychological point of view. Whether you can control that being a positive thing, like how you said, like maybe this is like how you cue the player, let them know that they've cleared out this room, or to give them the sense of like something could still happen in here, and you know, kind of depending on the route you want to guide the player in that case. Right.
And also, you know, just this sort of general sense of what's the player arc, or what's their progression. You can kind of play around with the sound and do some stuff there. So, you know, it's interesting. It brings up like there's a whole different case, and you don't generally see this in games because I think we don't always get this opportunity. I did work on a level that was like very mechanical, and it was very battle oriented and high action. And it was interesting because Giacchino actually proposed to me, he's like, hey, let's actually do high contrast here, and I'll do something really beautiful. Like so we did this real like high falsetto choral thing. So it was almost like that idea of like, it's otherworldly, right? But there's this battle going on, and there's stuff happening, and it's kind of chaotic, but there's this weird feeling of order on top of it. And it creates a totally different feel. And the power of sound, right? Like Steven Spielberg says, sound is 51% of the movie.
Right.
That's what he used to say. I don't know if he still says that. You know, and it's not by accident. It's like, it's very planned.
They even say you can go see a movie with poor video quality but great audio and be entertained, versus going to a movie with high quality video but poor audio. Doesn't translate that way. One thing, there's this whole like less is more approach in the sound design world, and there's a phrase, I'm trying to remember accurately, but it's like the less the audience notices your sound, the better job you did. And what that really translates to is you're keeping them immersed in whatever media you have them in. And if that sound is translating to them, like, you know, like the Transformer movies, for example, the very iconic transformation, metallic sounds of those, if that did not translate that well, you would be instantly in and out of that. And then it would take you, you know, a bit of your cognitive load to get back into the translation of cinema.
The other thing is you might find you would then be hypercritical of the visuals.
Yeah.
So if it didn't sound right, your brain is looking for an excuse. You know what I mean? Like, what's wrong here? And consciously you'll be like, oh, it's because of X, and it's a visual thing, when actually it could be a sound thing.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, that's why where they say the whole less is more approach. But yeah, I've heard where it says sound is 51%. But yeah, it's just a big importance. And sometimes it's so subtle because as humans, we're so used to hearing sounds naturally. Like even when people say like, I love the sound of silence, I guarantee you've never experienced a true sound of silence because there's always room tone, background noise. But there's these anechoic chambers where, you know, they do a lot of processing to record natural decibels of certain sounds, but it's like the most quietest area you could be. And people have experienced that you can hear like your own veins pulsating near your brain, you hear the blood flow. Like it brings you to a very uncomfortable, natural feeling. So to say that you want to have peace and absolute quiet, you'll start to go a little insane.
Well, it's also like I would even just say, because I don't spend a whole lot of time in sound booths or whatever, but like every time I've ever been in a sound booth, whether I'm recording or just there to direct or like, you know, just be involved, like especially a small sound booth, like being in a small sound booth can be very unnerving because it's noticeable how dampened your sound is. So even when you're speaking, it has a different quality because the wall is essentially like killing the wave, like on contact, like right there. And so it's like, that's a super interesting thing.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
So like on that game, one of my favorite sound designers, his name is Eric Kraber. He was my neighbor. So I shared a wall with our sound designer. And so like, which was fine by me. I didn't mind it because all day long, especially when we had like multiple games going, like for a long time working on the first Medal of Honor was like, I heard nothing but dinosaurs. It was all dinosaur sounds all day blasting through my wall. And it was like, I mean, nobody knows what a dinosaur sounds like. It's all made up. Right. So it was all super interesting to me because then I would just cruise over, look in the window because he had a window on his door. And I'd be like, which dinosaur was that? Right. So it's super, super fun. Yeah.
And a lot of things with sound design too is having to think outside the box too. So sometimes you might even be using a dinosaur sound to have something in translation for something completely different. And that's honestly the art when it comes to not only Foley recording, but just thinking outside the box in sound design in general. I can't think of the name of the sound designer, but one of the greatest examples where they broke it down was one of the newer Godzilla movies, like the first one with Bryan Cranston. There's like the Muto creature, and there's this scene where they're on the train tracks and they're trying to be quiet. So all the focus is on that creature just breathing or just moving around. Yeah. And they had like these high quality microphones, and I think they were just, you know, getting like a inflated balloon and just scraping it to get those like really crunchy sounds. And then when you drop down it, with the high sample rate it was set at, you get this really unique, organic, otherworldly life. Right. Because it was recorded on such a nice set of microphones, you know, it's like one way of thinking outside the box because, you know, obviously you can't record a real dinosaur or a real large creature. A lot of it is thinking outside the box. So,
you know, here's what's interesting and fun is like what you come to realize is that a lot of sounds actually aren't diegetic. They're not the real sounds because what you're doing is you're building things for people's expectation of what that is. Yeah. And especially when I've worked on shooters and same with horror games, there's a grammar, right? And like, if you change that grammar, you better have a good reason because like when we do silenced pistols, they don't make that pew, pew, pew sound, right? It's more like a cough sound, but like that's super not exciting for a video game. And so like we did something that was a little bit adjusted, but it was interesting because we had to be very careful not to like break the movie expectation of what that thing sounded like, right? Like same with like shotguns and, you know, the different weapons, like they were all sweetened quite a bit,
Yeah.
right? So for those listening, when I say sweetened, I mean edited in a way. It's like jargon for like making the sound better, right? Like you're sweetening the sound with like a little extra bass or more reverb or like whatever. Like, you're not a sound guy, but like basically
giving it some process over the dry sound to give it a bit more of a old natural
exactly
tone.
So how are you going to apply this knowledge now to your horror game? Do you have any direct plans?
Here's the thing, I'm going to backtrack a little bit too. So earlier I said that I'm the audio designer and creative director at Nobody Games. So that definitely requires having to wear both hats at a lot of times. And given that, it's a voluntary studio that we're developing here, and I'm very humble with the team that we have here for putting their time and creativity into it. But, a lot of us all have life priorities. So definitely a lot of scheduling and timing gets in the way. But there's a lot of times where I have to keep my focus on more the creative direction while we're getting everything all set in task. And for those listening to, Chris has been a great mentor for helping us out with Nobody Games too. So I just want to say thank you so much for the time and everything that's been very helpful for us. So with that being said, I've had to put a lot of focus on the creative direction and then kind of testing the waters with early audio implementation. But it's more of taking a lot of the knowledge and pre-production planning of trying to execute and have a directive plan with the sound design. And, I could talk for hours when it comes to psychological sound design elements, more from obviously like a linear film production point of view, because that's where a lot of my expertise came from. But a lot of the challenge is trying to translate that from a technical sound design point, because the difference with linear audio is, if you're doing a movie and you need that loud explosion at 3 minutes and 20 seconds, it's always going to be there, versus you got to tell, if you're doing this, then you got to interact with the audio here,
Right. And there's like there's an interesting organic nature, but also very planned feel of like, you're not actually in control of everything because the player has agency. They could walk around, they could do different things.
Right.
But I would say, so like put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to it. But like the way that ends up working out is you have to think a little bit in a different way, right? It's like an event-based thinking, it's even more, it's like a level down from loops. It's like you have to think about the events that happen in those loops and what you want to accentuate, etc. So here's just a side story. And I'm going to try and set this for you as a target, both as a creative director and as a sound person. So when I knew my gameplay was tuned correctly, I would get people in to play it at my desk because they were playing on like a dev kit. And I would hand them like the PS2 controller and then put the headphones on their head so they can't hear me. I'd leave, go let them settle in. I'd come back and then I wouldn't open the door too loud. I would hang out by the door, not look at the screen, and listen to the controller. The controller would tell me, I could tell where people were in a level, what they were doing, who they were fighting about. Like I knew because of the rhythms. And so like making great gameplay is being able to pay attention to the player rhythms, even when it's their choice of when to make those rhythms. So it's interesting. I would bring 2 or 3 different players in, and it was like listening to interpretive jazz drummers, right? They were generally on beat, right? But they sounded different because the way they played had like, it was like a Morse code handle. Like I could hear, even though they were saying the same stuff, the rhythm was a little different depending on who was playing. But each time I could still tell where they were in the level, what they were doing, who they were fighting, usually what weapon they had selected. Right.
That's a really interesting point of view from just, even when you say you don't come from like an audio background, but using your sense of some sort of sonic intelligence in that case, for you to be able to listen in and hear the rhythm of that controller, for you to determine what the actions are. And I'm sure, like, for examples, if someone, that someone's lost or stuck somewhere, there's not a whole lot of activity going on with the controller, but versus, that they're going up this hallway and to the right, and there's this creature that's going to take a few combo attacks. It's really interesting point of view, just like emphasizing from there. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's sort of general, like individual buttons don't sound that different. They actually, it's more like I can hear the difference between a face button and a shoulder button or a trigger button. And then the sticks, some people are really hard on the sticks. Some people are soft on the sticks, right? It's kind of like somebody who learned how to type in the typewriter era. Like you can hear them bang away on like a quiet keyboard, and you can still hear them because they're physically pressing the buttons as if it was a typewriter, versus someone who's like digital era. and they're very light on the keys. And so I could hear that in the players. So like the sticks I could hear, even though you think like the sticks don't make sound, they do when they hit the sides. And so I could hear generally what they were doing. And like the left one being more movement had a low, was less frequent. And the right one, because it was was more frequent. And so I could hear left hand, right hand. Yeah. Right. And then also hear the triggers versus what's going on. So like left trigger, right trigger. Like I could kind of pick it out. I played trumpet for a long time. So I have a musical knowledge, but I don't, I'm not a musician. Like I'm a game designer. And actually, here's what's interesting. The day that I realized that like I was technically good at playing the trumpet, but I didn't feel it.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. Like, I felt it when I played, but I didn't feel it. And then it wasn't getting this like feel for rhythms and stuff didn't show up until I started doing game design. Like that's where it finally expressed for me.
I feel like that's like a psychological, like you get like a point of dexterity out of that. That's where I imagine a little bit that may have translated.
And an ear.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. And ear there. But that the hand dexterity and translating to more of a calling when you're a game designer. And correct me if I'm not mistaken, but you did a lot more console game design. Was more of you. I mean,
generally, in fact, I tried to stay in the console world as long as I could, and the reason being was that the interface was consistent.
Okay.
Right. So in other words, I knew what instrument everybody was playing.
That makes sense.
Right. So like keyboard and mouse, you would say is the same thing, but you're like, no, there's like 112 keys on a keyboard plus a thing. I know that I have 12 buttons for interaction, right? Yeah. Plus start and select or what, you know what I mean? Like it was a consistent design starting point. So I always started interface out. Like what can the player do? What's their interface? And that's why I asked you actually for a slide of like, what can the player do? What's the controls? Yeah. Because like, that's the first part of the interaction loop that I want to get into, which is incorporating the player into the band, right? As far as like, they're going to play this instrument. What does it do? How can I mash this with everything else? So to use that music analogy, right? Yep. And like having empathy for like, basically like a bunch of people are going to play an instrument. I'm going to set up the rest of the band for them. And they should feel like they're always on time and know when the transitions are and like when to do a solo, like all of that stuff. Right. Like it's built into the way I think about game design.
Yeah, it's like you being the conductor in the case.
Yeah, kind of. And in the same way that you say like a good sound designer is like heard, not seen. It's the same thing with like a game designer. Like I always say that really great game design is when you don't know they were there. So it's kind of thankless, but like poor or maybe not great game design. I'm not even saying bad. I'm just saying that like you missed somewhere is when somebody curses your name, right? Or the game designer is like totally screwing me over. Like those are things to aspire to as far as like, I want people to feel the vision, but I'm having a conversation with them and I want them to not know that I'm there. Like they should just feel they're
absolutely. And returning back to, I know we got a little off topic, but going back to, like taking like from the psychological sound design things and what to add it into the current game. A lot of the work too is, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but having to over exaggerate some things like how you were the example with the silencer pistol. Like we know like that iconic, especially for me in my era of playing GoldenEye on N64, just the iconic pistol sound. It's forever heard everywhere too. But a lot of sound design, while still trying to be like the less is more and the less they notice, the better your work is. You also got to over exaggerate a lot of times too. And a lot of good examples I hear, especially from spatial audio in video games and more so indie horror games in general, is the overemphasis of hearing sounds around you, even if it's not really right next to you. Yeah. Like a great example is a lot of horror chase scenes, a lot of things from a sonic point of view that makes it so intimidating is they'll make the sound feel like it's just constantly breathing behind your neck. And if you actually really look around, they're really a little bit further away, but it gives you that sense of like, you don't have time to turn around. Otherwise you're screwed. And it gets you into like that frantic psychological point of view. But oh, you're good. Well,
no, I was gonna say like that's why like the first time I ever turned on spatial sound as a game designer, it was like, oh, it sucks. Right. Well, because everything was attenuated for distance and like and like all of a sudden I was like, we need to change this because like we're not making a simulation. I'm making an experience. And so we need to have a little bit more control over like, how these things are coming across. So,
and that's where, third-party softwares like Wise and Fmod were to make it a lot easier. Because in a lot of traditional game engines, it's a little bit tedious, or not. It's not necessarily tedious, but like you're pretty limited to what you could do versus bringing something else in that's more focused on how you want to morph this sound. Like, is this sound in a cave with more heavy reverb? That same sound versus being like in a dry, like indoor environment, just to have that freedom of control and the general spatial sound.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting. Sometimes when I play an indie game, sound isn't the strongest part, but generally the designs are a little bit more bare bones. So you can kind of get away with like, it's not spatial. It's, it's very like sound effectsy, right? Like pew, 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 kind of. And so you can kind of get away with like, there's these non-diegetic sounds to represent abstracts. Yeah. And so like, oh, by the way, pro tip number 6,000,072 is in a game design interview with somebody, if they don't make sound effects with their mouth, it's a point of suspicion. So anytime I've ever interviewed a game designer that didn't make sound effects, it's like basically like, oh, we have to reconsider this. Because what it indicates to me is not that they don't have any skill around sound, it's that they're not imagining a situation and providing their own sound to make it more real. Yeah. And it's like, it always raises the like hackles for me because I'm like, I wanted at least one pew pew or like one meow or something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it also shows characteristic too, like not only from like a creative point of view, but like seeing like that's how you think outside the box too. And it's funny that you bring that up because I remember on LinkedIn, I remember seeing, I forgot who it was, but they did that in their implementation just to see if the audio implementation is working. Like if this dragon is lifting up their wings and then a fire blast versus a tail hit, and it's just like a lot of like whoosh, boom, rawr. But it gets to the point like you understand where their vision is before creating the sound, but it's just like a nice characteristic element too.
Yeah, and it's great because it's better than a temp sound that you got out of a library that's totally wrong, but sounds like it might be right. Yeah. And so like I'm a big believer in putting obviously temp stuff in my work. Like it's essentially so obviously temp that it makes you want to replace it.
Yeah.
Right. So because you're like, I'm tired of seeing this pink texture. Let's go in and fix this. Or like I'm tired of hearing like Chris do pew pews.
Yeah, definitely a lot of early prototype. I tend to do the same thing, but going back to my previous job, I was developing a 90,000 sound effect library. So I have, almost a few terabytes of sound effects on my back end of like, okay, just placeholder for putting these sounds in here for early production just to see if things are technically implemented correctly, and then going back in. But you kind of nailed it with like the intention that I know that it does not sound correct because I know that sonically and from like a mental point of view, I'm going to replace that.
Totally. Well, but the other thing though is like I am looking for asset similarity. Let's say sound, for instance. If it's like a creaky door that's going to be like, I am looking for something about the same length, or like it's a honker, right? So it's like, but like I'm looking for, because sometimes you're doing budgeting, right? And you want to get a memory budget and a bunch of other stuff. So you need something that's like technically has lots of the same like software qualities, same length, about the right like loudness, etc. It's a sound effect, not a whatever. And like you put those things in because I would even name them like door creak replace, because eventually you just write over it, right? Yeah, and then just replace the replace one, and so that I would have all these temp textures, enemies that look like cones cruising around. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's all kinds of stuff just to get the whole picture going. So we're almost out of time, but I'm gonna give you some homework, I think.
That would be great. Yeah. So I'd love you some homework.
And like basically the questions first, and the homework will come from us trying to answer the questions. Like you're working on a horror game. I've seen it. I understand it. Thank you for the most recent documentation updates. Yeah, absolutely. I put 2 bullet points in our Discord chat, but the next thing is like, in light of our conversation here, I want to walk around the house. So your homework is like, get me an executable so I can cruise around it and see it, because like I might have more sort of tips and tricks just from cruising around and get a feel for the spaces. And then that way Like, because we're at that point. You need to start marrying the paper design with the space,
right?
Or basically facilitate the paper design by working with the existing space, right? And start looking for like what things fit here, what's not going to fit there. How do I route plan, right? Like, even though I made first-person shooters, they have agency. I was always like secretly in control of the camera, right? Because I was leading you by your inclination to A, want to participate, and B, look at something interesting, right?
Yeah.
So the visual design was always leading the camera, and how I did that could help you here, because there's a lot of like subtle visual cues that we can build into the environment to lead people around. And we can also play with light, sound contrast, like I said, comfort versus discomfort, you know, and then start to work puzzle elements in a way that like, I think it'd be really cool if you got hyper dynamic with your sound and music. Might be really neat, because then I think you show off like a unique skill set that you have in the fact that like, let's double down on that thing, and that makes your design like pop. Like, it gives it a key differentiator, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it spot on too. And even what I said earlier, where I was, having to wear the creative direction side and then do the sound design side. But I've been able to spend so much time of the research and development to see how the production's going, while learning the expertise of how to make my sound design more efficient for this game, and gave me plenty of opportunities to really start dialing how we want to approach that. But we're definitely heading towards an environmental, psychological, and sound design aspect out of there, where I think it could really shine. All because this is where this game initially started, was just I wanted to practice implementing sound into a horror game. And I want to stand true onto that.
Right. Awesome. Well, let's start wrapping it up. I want you to come back on another little bit further down the road. But I also think it might be worthwhile for you and I to do a couple of recorded like review sessions. Yeah. Like, let me look at it. I'll play it. We'll record, like screen record. You know what I mean? And like grab our conversation too, which is totally different than this podcast stuff. I think that might be kind of fun for you and me, but also it's like a double usage. One, it's great work product for us, because then you can have like, oh, I've got all the notes, right? Like, this all happened in review, but it also turns into potential content for the two of us of like being
that'd be fantastic. Again, like I said 100 times, I appreciate all the help, and thank you again for being on this episode. It's always interesting to be on the other side, as people may not know that I do a lot of the audio editing for the Brain Arcade podcast. Yeah, that's right. So it's fun to be on the other side of it now. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, if it gets weird for you to audio edit yourself, let us know. We'll find someone else to do this episode.
I'm used to hearing my voice. I've been doing audio editing for over 10 years, so I'm used to this.
So but yeah, definitely come back on. I want a game update from you. And I think actually, so I danced around it. We didn't pitch it to the audience today, because I wanted you to have the stage space to present what you wanted. But I think come back on next time and pitch it. Yeah. And like explain it, and let's talk about like reviewing it, and then we'll try to schedule like a screen record.
Yeah, absolutely. By next episode, we'll have something I'll be really excited to share for everyone. So yeah, thank you.
Right on. Thanks, John. Thanks for coming on Brain Arcade.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeeacross.com.
You deserve better healthcare, and so do we all. Medicine in America is a podcast that shares real stories of patients and doctors reshaping the future, because the revolution in care isn't coming, it's already here. Real stories, real change, a better future for healthcare.
Electricast. Electricast.
Welcome to the Candle Power Hour. Come with us backstage behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your hosts for the Candle Power Hour.
Electricast.